I never thought I'd find myself in this position, but the moment I realized my own flesh and blood had taken everything from me after my husband passed away, something inside me broke. And what followed was something even I didn't see coming. But let me take you back to the beginning, when everything seemed perfect, when love and family were all I needed, until the unthinkable happened. I never imagined that my life could change in an instant. It was supposed to be another ordinary day, the kind where everything feels stable, predictable. My name is Laura, and I've always prided myself on keeping things together, especially after I married Daniel. We built a beautiful life in Chicago, 2 kids, a cozy house, a stable job for me, and a thriving career for him. We had dreams, we had everything we could ever ask for. But all that changed one cold November evening. Daniel had been feeling off for weeks, but he insisted it was just stress from work. He'd been under pressure lately, and I, being the loving wife that I was, brushed it off. "You're just tired, hun. Take a break. Let's go out this weekend," I would say. He always smiled weakly, assuring me it was nothing. That Friday, when he didn't show up for dinner, I didn't think much of it. It wasn't until I received that dreaded phone call the following morning that everything came crashing down. "Mrs. Laura Williams, I'm sorry, but your husband's condition has worsened. We need you to come down to the hospital right away." I could barely process what the doctor was saying. My legs gave way, and the world around me spun like a carousel gone too fast. By the time I reached the hospital, it was already too late. Daniel was gone, just like that. He was taken from me, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. The shock was suffocating. I remember sitting in that sterile hospital room, the beeping of machines still ringing in my ears, my mind struggling to comprehend it all. He had been my everything. How could he be gone? My hands shook as I reached out, touching the cold, lifeless hand of the man who had once been the love of my life. I didn't know what to do next. I just stared at his face, the face I had grown so used to seeing every morning, every night. Now it was empty, gone. The days that followed were a blur. The funeral arrangements, the condolence calls, the never-ending sympathy from friends and family. Everyone seemed so sorry for me, and I was grateful for their support. At least, I thought I was. But deep down, I felt like I was drowning. It was as if my whole life had been turned upside down in the blink of an eye. I was left to pick up the pieces, and though people around me tried to comfort me, I couldn't shake the feeling of emptiness that settled in my chest. I spent weeks just going through the motions, struggling to stay afloat. The house, once filled with laughter and warmth, now felt like a prison. My children, Sam and Sarah, had their own ways of coping. Sam, the older of the two, became withdrawn. He would retreat to his room for hours, lost in his thoughts. Sarah, on the other hand, tried to fill the silence by talking nonstop. She clung to me like I was her lifeline. It broke my heart to see them in pain, but I didn't know how to help them. I was just as lost as they were. And then the unthinkable started happening. It was subtle at first, easy to overlook. But looking back, I see the signs, the little things that should have raised alarms. Sam started asking me about the insurance money, asking how much Daniel had left in his life insurance policy, if we would be okay financially. I brushed it off as a teenager's concern, not thinking much of it. But then Sarah came to me one evening, her eyes wide with worry. "Mom, do you think we'll have to move?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Why would we move?" I asked, forcing a smile. "Well, with Dad gone, do we have enough money to stay here?" Her voice faltered. "Are we going to be okay?" At that moment, I realized something. They weren't asking out of concern for me. They were asking because they were worried about themselves. They were worried about what would happen to their inheritance, to their share of what Daniel and I had worked so hard for. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. A few days later, I found Sam and Sarah in the living room, whispering to each other, their faces serious, their words too quiet for me to hear. I pretended not to notice, but inside, something in me twisted. These were my children, the ones I had raised, the ones I had nurtured through every difficulty. And now they were starting to look at me as if I was the obstacle standing between them and what they believed was rightfully theirs. But I couldn't confront them. Not yet. I wasn't ready to face the reality of what I was beginning to suspect. My own flesh and blood, my children, were turning into strangers, and the betrayal was slowly unraveling my sense of safety, my trust in them. Have you ever had a moment when you realize the people you love most, the ones you trust more than anyone else, aren't who you thought they were. It's a sinking feeling, isn't it? I want to know, has anything like this ever happened to you? Have you ever felt betrayed by the ones you loved the most? Pause. Make sure you hit that subscribe button and ring the bell, because you won't want to miss what happens next in this story. You won't believe how far this betrayal goes. Trust me. The days blurred together after Daniel's death. I could hardly tell one day from the next, my grief clouding everything around me. I went through the motions, waking up, getting the kids ready for school, making dinner, pretending everything was fine. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. The whispers in the corners of the house, the quick glances my children exchanged when they thought I wasn't looking, it was all adding up to something darker. And then it happened. It started with the lawyer's call. "Mrs. Williams, we need to discuss the will." I could barely hold the phone as I heard the words. The will. Daniel had always handled the finances. I didn't know the first thing about our investments, our savings, or any of that. Daniel took care of it all, and I trusted him. I didn't think I needed to know. But now I had no choice but to face what he had left behind. I remember walking into the lawyer's office with Sam and Sarah, both of them looking more nervous than I was. It felt like the air was thick with tension as the lawyer went over the details of the will. The house, the car, the savings accounts, everything was laid out. It should have been simple, but the room felt suffocating. And then the bombshell. "According to the will," the lawyer said, his voice almost too calm, "Daniel left everything to you, Laura." I breathed a sigh of relief. That's what I had expected. I wasn't greedy. I wasn't looking for anything more. Daniel had always been good to me, and I trusted that he wanted to take care of me, especially after his passing. But then came the part that made my heart stop. And of course, the children are entitled to their shares once they come of age, but they must be responsible for the upkeep of the family assets. I glanced at Sam, who had been quiet throughout the meeting. He looked different. His eyes weren't filled with the sadness I expected. Instead, they were calculating, as though he was running some kind of mental math, calculating his next move. Sarah, sitting beside him, had her arms crossed tightly, her face a mask of indifference. She wasn't showing any of the pain I thought she'd have, not the way I had. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, but I didn't have the strength to confront it, not yet. That night after the lawyer's office, everything started to change. I could feel the shift, the coldness creeping into the air. Sam started asking questions that were too pointed, too direct. He wanted to know how much money was in the accounts, whether we could afford to keep the house. I brushed him off, told him it was all taken care of, but the look in his eyes told me he didn't believe me. "Mom," he said one evening, as I sat alone in the living room, "we need to talk about the house. I think it's time to make some changes." I froze. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. Changes? What did he mean by that? The house wasn't just a house. It was our home. It was Daniel's legacy. But I couldn't bring myself to challenge him. I didn't want to believe my own son could be thinking about money this way. It wasn't him, was it? A few days later, I overheard a conversation between Sam and Sarah. I had been walking down the hallway when I heard their voices coming from the kitchen. They didn't know I was there. "We can't just let her have everything, Sarah. We need to do something," Sam said, his voice low but sharp. I stopped dead in my tracks. What was he saying? My heart pounded in my chest as I pressed my ear to the wall. "You heard what the lawyer said," Sarah replied, her voice shaky. "Once we're old enough, it'll be ours anyway. But if we can't make it happen now, Mom's not going to let us touch it." "Mom won't know what hit her." Sam's voice was cold, calculating. "She's too weak right now to fight back. We just need to wait until the right moment." I felt like the ground had been pulled out from under me. I stood there, frozen, unable to move. My own children were plotting against me, against the very woman who had given them everything. The tears that welled up in my eyes weren't just from the betrayal. It was the realization that I wasn't just grieving the loss of my husband. I was also losing my children. They were no longer the kids I had raised. They were strangers, driven by greed. I had spent so many years loving and protecting them, and now they saw me as nothing more than an obstacle in their path. It was like I was invisible to them, a mere pawn to be moved around on a chessboard. But this wasn't a game. This was my life. I couldn't let them win. I couldn't let them take what Daniel and I had worked for, what I had built for my family. And the thought of being abandoned by my own children, well, it was a pain I wasn't ready to face. I needed to act. But how? I started watching them more closely. Every word, every glance, every action, they were all part of their plan. They thought they were being clever, but they underestimated one thing. They underestimated me. I didn't want to believe it, but the truth was undeniable. I was going to have to fight for what was mine. And I would do whatever it took to keep my family's legacy intact. But my plan, it would have to be perfect. One wrong move, and I could lose everything, including myself. So I waited. I played the part of the grieving widow, the helpless mother, while secretly I began plotting my revenge. I wasn't going to let them take what was rightfully mine without a fight. As I sat in that empty house, the silence pressing in on me, I knew one thing for certain. I would get my revenge, and it would leave them speechless. But before I reveal what happens next, what would you do if you were in my shoes? Would you let your children take everything from you, or would you fight back? Comment below. I want to hear your thoughts. And if you haven't subscribed yet, make sure to do so now, because you won't believe what happens in the next part of this story. I spent the next few weeks in a haze, pretending to be the grieving widow everyone expected me to be. But inside, I was a different person. I was angry, hurt, and betrayed by the two people I loved most in the world. They had no idea what I was capable of. They thought I was weak, but I was. No, I wasn't the woman they thought I was, and it was time to show them that. It was late one evening, just after dinner, when I sat at the kitchen table, my mind racing. Sam had been more distant than usual, but he hadn't stopped pushing for more information about the house and the finances. It wasn't the first time he'd asked, but this time, his tone was different. He was more insistent, more desperate. "I think we need to sell the house, Mom," he said, his eyes narrowing as he stared at me across the table. "It's too big for us now. You can't afford the upkeep alone. We need to move into something more manageable." My heart tightened in my chest, but I kept my face calm, my voice steady. "I'm not ready to sell, Sam. This house is all I have left of your father." Sam's expression faltered for just a moment. I could see the frustration in his eyes, but it was quickly replaced by that same cold determination that had started to define him. "Mom," he said, his voice dropping to a more serious tone, "it's not just about what you want anymore. We need to think about what's best for us. We've got our own lives to live now. You can't keep holding on to everything." That was it. That was the moment I realized they had no respect for me. They didn't care about my grief, my pain. They didn't care about the sacrifices I'd made for them, the love I'd poured into them. They only cared about what they could get, what they could take. And I wasn't going to let them have it. I smiled, but it wasn't a smile of warmth. It was the kind of smile you give when you've already decided your next move. "You're right, Sam," I said, my voice smooth, almost too calm. "I can't afford the upkeep, but maybe I don't need to sell the house after all." His eyes flickered with confusion. "What do you mean?" I leaned back in my chair, staring at him intently. "I've been thinking, maybe I can do something with the house. Maybe I can turn it into something more profitable." Sam blinked, clearly not expecting that response. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about a renovation, turning the house into a rental property," I said, my mind already working out the details. "I'll keep the house, but I'll make it work for me. I'm not going to sell, not yet." I could see the wheels turning in his head. He wasn't happy about it. I knew that. But for the moment, he didn't have a leg to stand on. Sarah, who had been quietly listening from the kitchen counter, piped up. "But, Mom, we're still going to need money to keep the house running. What if we can't afford it?" I looked over at her, my eyes hardening. "We'll figure it out. I'm not going to let this house go. It's not just about the money. It's about keeping control, keeping what Daniel and I built. And I'm not giving that up without a fight." They didn't like it. I could tell. But neither of them pushed back any further. For now, I had control of the narrative, and I wasn't about to give it up. That night, as I lay in bed, I thought about everything I had lost. Daniel, my partner, my love, was gone. But it was more than that. I had lost my children too. I realized with a sickening clarity that they weren't the people I thought they were. They had turned into greedy strangers, people who saw me as nothing more than a source of income. And that's when I knew. If they were going to take from me, I would make sure they didn't get away with it. I would take back what was mine. I started to plan. The next day, I went to see a contractor. I knew nothing about renovation, but I wasn't about to let that stop me. I needed to transform the house, make it so valuable that they couldn't touch it. I would find a way to make this property work for me, to make it a fortress, something I could defend. The contractor I found was experienced, sharp, and most importantly, discreet. He had done work for other high-end properties around Chicago, and I knew he could get the job done without anyone knowing what I was really planning. We went over the details of the house, the areas that needed work. But as we discussed the renovations, my mind was racing. I needed this project to be more than just about the house. I needed it to be the foundation of my revenge. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became. I had to play the long game. I had to let them believe they could control me, that they could take what they wanted without any consequences. But while they were busy focusing on the house, on their petty schemes, I would be setting the stage for something much bigger. I spent the next few weeks quietly working with the contractor, overseeing the changes, and making sure everything was falling into place. My children, of course, didn't notice. They were too busy bickering over who would get what once the house was sold. They had no idea what I was really doing. But I had a plan. I wasn't just going to let them win. Not now, not ever. It was time to make them regret underestimating me. But how far would I go to make them pay? Do you think I'm doing the right thing by keeping control of the house? Or am I taking this too far? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you haven't subscribed yet, don't wait. Hit the bell so you won't miss the next part of this shocking story. It's strange how things change when you stop caring about the consequences. When you've been broken so many times that the thought of more pain doesn't even faze you anymore. That's where I was, completely numb, completely focused on one thing, making sure my children never got the chance to take what wasn't theirs. And I was going to make them pay for thinking they could. The renovations on the house were well underway, and with every passing day, I felt a little more in control. But I wasn't just improving the house, I was reshaping my life, preparing for something bigger. My children didn't know it, but they were playing into my hands perfectly. They thought I was weak, that I was just the grieving mother who didn't know what to do. But I had plans that would leave them speechless. Plans that would make them regret every single moment of their betrayal. It started small. A conversation with Sam one evening, when he casually mentioned how he couldn't wait for me to finally sell the house so he could start getting his share of the inheritance. He thought he was being slick, dropping hints as if I couldn't hear the greed in his voice. But he didn't realize that every word he spoke was a piece of my puzzle falling into place. "Mom, when are you going to sell the house?" Sam asked, his tone casual, like we were just talking about moving to a new neighborhood. "I mean, it's too much for just you, and I'm sure you want to cash out soon, right?" I looked at him, pretending not to notice the underlying hunger in his words. "Sam, we've talked about this. The house is staying. For now, I'm focusing on making it work for me. But I need you to trust me, okay? I'll handle things." Sam didn't like that answer. I could see the frustration in his eyes, but he didn't press further. Not yet. Sarah, on the other hand, was a different story. She was the one who came to me, eyes wide with concern, a little more nervous than I expected. "Mom, you know I don't want to push you, but are you sure about keeping the house?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling slightly. "I just don't want you to struggle." I smiled, the kind of smile that wasn't full of warmth but was more like a mask that I had worn for years. "I'm sure, sweetheart. Don't worry about me, I'm fine." But inside, I wasn't fine. I was plotting, carefully orchestrating every single move. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind was racing with ideas. Sam and Sarah didn't know it yet, but they were walking right into my trap. Every time they pushed, every time they made those subtle demands, they were showing me just how badly they wanted it all. They thought they had me figured out, but they didn't. They didn't see the fire that was building inside me, the fire that had been smoldering ever since Daniel's death. I started putting the plan into motion. The next step was to convince Sam that I was starting to consider selling. It was a delicate game. I couldn't let him see that I was playing him. He needed to think he was getting somewhere, that he was making progress. So I started talking about potential buyers, how the real estate market was heating up, how it could be a great time to make some extra money. At first, Sam was hesitant, but after a few weeks of gently encouraging him, he started to come around. He thought he was winning. He thought I was finally ready to let go of what I had worked so hard to keep. And that's when I made my move. I reached out to a trusted friend, someone who had always been loyal to me, someone who owed me a favor. I told them to prepare for a potential deal. I made it sound like I was finally ready to sell, that I was on the verge of signing the papers. But I was lying. The truth was, I was setting up a fake sale, a sale that would never happen. But Sam didn't know that. The trap was set, and now it was time for him to walk right into it. A week later, when Sam brought it up again, I told him I was ready to move forward. I told him I was meeting with the buyer the next day. His eyes lit up. He couldn't believe it. He thought he had won. "I knew you'd come around, Mom," he said, his voice dripping with satisfaction. "This is the right move. Trust me, you're going to feel so much better once the house is gone." I kept my voice steady. "I hope so, Sam. I really do." But deep inside, I was smiling. I knew exactly what I was doing. The sale wasn't going to happen, but Sam didn't need to know that yet. He was so close to getting what he wanted, and that was when I would strike. Sarah was easier to manipulate. She wasn't as sly as Sam, but she was just as eager to get her hands on the money. I could see her waiting for me to give her permission to move forward, but I had other plans for her. One day, I took Sarah out for lunch. It was just the two of us, and I made sure the conversation steered in the right direction. I asked her how she felt about moving away from the house, how she thought it would feel to start fresh. She was all for it. She had always dreamed of living in a big city, in a fancy apartment, far away from the house that held so many memories. But as I looked at her, I realized she wasn't just talking about the house. She was talking about her future that didn't involve me. And in that moment, I realized how deep her betrayal ran. It wasn't just about the house. It was about everything. She wanted to leave me behind. But I wasn't going to let her. I made a few calls, planted a few seeds of doubt. Sarah would start to believe the house wasn't worth keeping, that it would cost too much to maintain. I knew her well enough to know that once she saw the financial strain of keeping the house, she would want to sell too. The game was almost over. My children had no idea what was coming. They were too focused on their own greed, too blind to see that I was already one step ahead of them. "What do you think of my plan so far? Do you think I'm doing the right thing, or am I taking it too far? Let me know what you think in the comments. And if you haven't subscribed yet, don't miss out on the next part of this thrilling story. Hit the bell so you're the first to know when it drops." I had been playing the long game for weeks now, each move calculated, each word carefully chosen. But it wasn't until the moment I saw the fear in Sam's eyes that I realized I was truly in control. It was a quiet Saturday morning when the phone call came. I was at the kitchen table, sipping my coffee, when the screen lit up with an unfamiliar number. I hesitated for a moment before answering, already knowing who it was. "Mrs. Williams, I just wanted to inform you that the buyer you were considering for the house, well, they've pulled out of the deal." The words hit me like a slap to the face. I had expected some kind of setback, but this was bigger than I had anticipated. "Why?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "They've reconsidered their purchase," the voice on the other end explained. "It seems the property isn't as viable as they initially thought." I sat there for a long moment, the weight of the situation crashing down on me. I had worked so hard to set this up, to make them believe the sale was imminent. And now, with one phone call, it had all come undone. But then it hit me. The buyer hadn't pulled out because the house wasn't worth it. No, they'd pulled out because they'd seen through the act. They knew they were being played. And that realization made something inside me snap. I hung up the phone and sat there in silence. The calm, the coldness, it all made sense now. I had been underestimated, outsmarted by my own children. When Sam came home that afternoon, he walked straight into the kitchen with that familiar smug look on his face. He was trying so hard to act casual, but I could see through him. He was nervous. He didn't know what was coming. "Mom," he said, "I spoke to the buyer. They said they were ready to move forward. I think we're finally going to get this done." I didn't say a word at first. I just looked at him, my gaze steady, calculating. He looked confused, his brow furrowed. The moment stretched on too long, and I could see the tension building in him. "Mom," Sam repeated, "everything's good, right?" I smiled, but it wasn't a warm, comforting smile. It was the kind of smile you give when you're about to make someone realize just how wrong they were. "I don't think the buyer is coming through, Sam," I said softly, watching the color drain from his face. "In fact, the sale's off." "What?" Sam's voice cracked slightly as he stepped forward. "What do you mean? Why? We had everything set up." I leaned back in my chair, savoring the moment, letting the silence between us stretch. "You didn't really think I would sell, did you?" For a second, he didn't answer. He just stared at me, his eyes wide with disbelief. Then it clicked. The realization crossed his face, and in that moment, I knew he understood. "You played me," Sam whispered, the shock in his voice unmistakable. I nodded slowly. "I did, and now it's time for you to face the consequences of thinking I was an easy target." Sam didn't say anything else. He just stood there, his hands clenching into fists at his sides, struggling to regain his composure. But the damage was already done. He wasn't in control anymore. I could see it in his eyes, fear. He was scared, not of me but of what he had lost, what he had failed to take. I wasn't finished yet. I hadn't exacted my full revenge. There was more to do, more to say, more consequences to deal with. The next day, I called Sarah into the living room. She was still under the impression that the house was going to be sold soon, still believing that everything was going according to plan. I had been feeding her the same lies I had fed Sam, letting her believe that the sale was imminent, that we would be moving on soon. But now, it was time for her to wake up to the truth. "Sarah," I said as she sat across from me, "I've been thinking a lot about what we've discussed." She looked at me eagerly, nodding. "Yeah, what about?" "I think it's time to stop pretending," I said, my voice low but firm. "You've been pushing me for so long, and now you see the reality of things. The house isn't going anywhere." Her face twisted with confusion, then quickly shifted to anger. "What do you mean? We need to sell, Mom. We need to get our share. Don't you understand? You're not going to be able to keep it forever." I leaned forward, my eyes never leaving hers. "I'm not going to sell. Not now, not ever." "What are you saying?" Sarah asked, her voice rising. "You can't keep us trapped in this house with nothing to show for it. I deserve more. We both deserve more." I could hear the desperation in her voice. The greed. She didn't care about the family, about the memories that lived in this house. She just cared about herself, about what she could get out of it. I stood up from my chair, my movements slow but deliberate. "You're not going to get what you think you deserve. You've already taken enough." "What do you mean? What are you going to do?" Sarah's eyes widened in realization, and she took a step back. I didn't answer her immediately. I didn't need to. I let the silence hang between us, a heavy weight pressing down on the room. And then I said something that sent chills down her spine. "I'm not going to sell. I'm going to hold on to everything. And when the time is right, you'll wish you never crossed me." For a moment, there was nothing but the sound of her breath catching in her throat. She stared at me, the realization sinking in. She hadn't seen this side of me before, the side that was cold, calculating, and relentless. She thought I was weak. She thought she could push me around. But now she was learning the hard way that she had underestimated me. "What would you do if your children turned on you like this? Would you fight back, or would you let them take everything? Let me know what you think in the comments below. And if you're following this story, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell, because you're not going to want to miss what happens next." The tension in the house had reached a boiling point. It wasn't just the silence hanging in the air. It was the heavy weight of betrayal, of deceit. Sam and Sarah still didn't fully understand what they were up against. They thought I was just playing games, that I'd cave in, that I'd give in to their demands like I had for so many years before. They were wrong. I had always been the supportive mother. I had always put their needs ahead of my own. But the moment they turned against me, the moment they showed me that they saw me as nothing more than a pawn in their scheme, I knew it was time to stop being weak. I wasn't going to let them take what was mine. I wasn't going to let them destroy the last remnants of what I had left, my dignity, my home, my legacy. The day I decided to confront them was a Tuesday. The house was eerily quiet, as it had been for the past few weeks. Sam was in his room, staring at his phone, probably calculating how much he could get if he sold his share. Sarah was somewhere in the house, probably talking to her friends, but I could feel her calculating every word I said, trying to figure out what I was planning next. I stood in the living room, staring out the window, watching the sun dip lower in the sky. I took a deep breath. It was time to bring everything out into the open. When Sam walked into the room, his expression was casual, too casual. He still thought he was in control, that he had the upper hand. But I knew better. I knew that he was about to find out just how wrong he was. "Mom," he said, his voice steady, "we need to talk about the house." I turned to face him, my expression calm, but my heart racing with a mix of anger and determination. "We need to talk, all right," I said, my voice low but firm. "You've been pushing me, manipulating me, and for what? To get your hands on something that doesn't belong to you." His face flickered for a moment, a brief look of surprise flashing across his features. But he quickly masked it with that same arrogant expression. "I'm just trying to help, Mom," he said, trying to sound convincing, but I could see the cracks in his facade. "You can't keep this house forever. It's time to move on, to let go. I'm doing this for you." I laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. "Don't pretend you're doing this for me, Sam. You're doing this for yourself, for your own selfish reasons. You think you can just come in here, play the grieving son, and take everything without consequences." His eyes widened slightly, but he quickly recovered. "What are you talking about? What consequences?" I stepped closer to him, not backing down for a second. "You've underestimated me, and now you're going to pay the price for that." He took a step back, the unease growing in his eyes. "What are you going to do, Mom? Are you going to fight me? This house isn't even worth all the trouble. You're just wasting your time." I stepped even closer, my voice steady but full of rage. "You think this is just about the house, don't you? No, this is about respect. This is about me not letting my own children tear everything I've worked for apart. You've made a mistake, Sam. A huge mistake." He blinked, his posture stiffening. "You're crazy. You don't know what you're doing. If you don't sell this house, you'll lose everything. You'll be stuck in this place forever alone. Don't you see that?" I leaned in, staring directly into his eyes. "You've already lost, Sam, because you never understood me. You never understood what I was capable of, and now you're about to find out." At that moment, Sarah entered the room, sensing the tension between us. She stood by the doorway, her face a mask of confusion. "What's going on? Why are you two yelling?" I turned to her, my eyes cold. "I'm tired of the games, Sarah. I'm tired of pretending everything is okay when it's not. You've been just as guilty as Sam. You've been feeding him lies, plotting behind my back like I'm some fool." Her eyes widened. "What are you talking about, Mom?" "You know exactly what I'm talking about," I said, my voice icy. "I know you've been working with Sam, planning how you'll split everything up once I'm gone. You think I don't see it, but I do. I've been watching, waiting for the right moment to show you both just how wrong you are." The room was silent, except for the sound of Sarah's shallow breathing. Sam was staring at me now, the anger boiling in his eyes. "You think you can control everything, huh? You think you're smarter than us? You don't know what we've been doing behind your back. We've been working on this for months, Mom. You don't have a clue how much we've planned for this." I felt a rush of adrenaline. This was it. This was the moment I had been waiting for. I wasn't just going to sit back and let them destroy me. I was going to fight back, and I wasn't going to stop until they understood the price of betraying me. "You have no idea what you're dealing with," I said, my voice calm, but with an edge of steel that sent a chill down both of their spines. You thought I was weak. You thought you could take everything from me without consequences. But now, I'm going to show you just how far I'll go to protect what's mine. You're going to regret ever thinking you could outsmart me. Sam and Sarah both took a step back, their faces pale. The realization had hit them. They were out of their depth. They had underestimated me in every possible way. And now, they were going to pay. I turned on my heel, walking out of the room without another word. They could feel the weight of my resolve, the certainty in my every step. I wasn't going to back down. Not now, not ever. I had played the part of the grieving widow, the weak mother for too long. But that woman was gone. The woman standing in front of them now was someone they had never seen before, someone who had been broken but was now stronger than ever. I had one goal now, to make them regret everything they had done, to make them see that no one could take what was mine without facing the consequences. Do you think I'm doing the right thing by standing up to my children, or am I taking this too far? Comment below with your thoughts. And if you haven't subscribed yet, make sure you do so now. You won't want to miss the shocking twist that's coming next. The days after my confrontation with Sam and Sarah were unlike anything I had ever experienced. The silence in the house grew unbearable, but it wasn't just the lack of noise. It was the tension, the fear, the realization that things had shifted irrevocably. It felt like the calm before a storm, only I wasn't sure when the storm would hit or how much damage it would cause. But I could feel it building. I could feel the storm coming for me, for them, and I had prepared myself for the worst. I had spent months setting up my plan, meticulously laying out each move, watching as my children slowly fell into the trap I had set. They thought they were the ones in control, that they could manipulate me, take what I had worked so hard for. But they had no idea how wrong they were. One evening, just a few days after my conversation with Sam and Sarah, I received a call from the bank. It was the moment I had been waiting for, the final piece of my puzzle. "Mrs. Williams, we've processed the documents you submitted for the property refinance," the voice on the other end said. "We've approved the loan. The house is now fully under your name, with a much higher value than it was before." I leaned back in my chair, feeling a rush of victory flood through me. This was it. This was the moment where I truly had control, not just of the house, but of everything. I had manipulated the system, played the game, and now I was about to make them pay for every ounce of betrayal. As I hung up the phone, I heard footsteps behind me. Sam. He had been avoiding me for days, but now he was here. He had that look on his face, the same look he had when he thought he could intimidate me, manipulate me into doing what he wanted. But now I knew better, and so did he. "Mom, we need to talk," he said, his voice flat, as if he was trying to keep his composure. I didn't turn to face him. I didn't need to. "You're right, we do need to talk." There was a long silence, the kind of silence that makes you feel the weight of every word, every movement. I could sense his growing unease, and it made me smile inside. He stepped closer, but I didn't move. "Look," he started, his voice tinged with frustration. "We both know this house isn't practical anymore. You need to let go. You need to sell. I don't understand why you're holding on to this when it's clearly—" I cut him off with a simple, calm word. "No." He blinked, caught off guard. "What do you mean, no?" I finally turned to face him, my gaze steady, unwavering. "I'm not selling. I'm not giving in to you, Sam. You and Sarah can stop pretending like you're doing this for me. You're doing this for yourselves, and I'm done letting you get away with it." His eyes narrowed, anger flashing across his face. "You don't understand what you're doing. You can't afford to keep this place. You're going to lose everything, Mom. You'll be out on the streets, and it'll be all your fault." I stood up, my voice calm but firm. "I'm not the one who's going to lose anything, Sam. You are." "What are you talking about?" he asked, his voice rising. I smiled, but it wasn't a smile of warmth. It was the smile of someone who knew they had already won. "The house is mine. I've refinanced it. I've secured the property under my name, and now there's nothing you can do to take it from me. It's over, Sam. You've lost." He stood there, frozen, as the words sank in. I could see the shock on his face. He hadn't expected this. He thought he had all the power, that he could manipulate me into selling, but I had outsmarted him. You can't be serious," Sam whispered, disbelief flooding his voice. "I'm serious," I said, stepping closer to him. "I've been serious this whole time, but you were too blinded by greed to see it." I watched as the realization spread across his face, slowly at first, then all at once. He had underestimated me. He had thought that his cunning, his plans would win out. But in the end, it was me who had the last laugh. As I turned to walk away, I heard him mutter something under his breath. But I didn't care. His words no longer held any power over me. I was free. Free from their manipulation. Free from the constant betrayal. But there was still one more person to deal with. Sarah. I had already taken care of Sam, but Sarah, she wasn't going to be as easy. She had been watching everything unfold from the sidelines, her face a mask of uncertainty and fear. She knew her time was coming. A few hours later, she approached me cautiously, her steps hesitant, unsure of how to handle the situation. She didn't know what to expect from me anymore. I had been the victim in her eyes for so long, but now I was something else entirely. "Mom," she began, her voice trembling, I don't understand. What happened? Why are you doing this?" I turned to her, my eyes cold but filled with a deep sadness. "Because I'm done being your victim. I'm done being your pawn. You and Sam both thought you could take everything from me without any consequences, but now you see that I'm not the weak woman you thought I was." She stared at me, silent for a long moment, and then, slowly, the tears started to fall. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice barely audible. I shook my head. "Sorry doesn't change anything, but I'll make sure you learn from this. I'll make sure you never make the same mistake again." Sarah nodded, her shoulders shaking with quiet sobs. She wasn't just crying because of what I had done to her. She was crying because she realized the weight of her betrayal, and it was too late to take it back. The aftermath was just as devastating as I had imagined. Sam and Sarah had no choice but to accept that they had lost. They tried to salvage what little dignity they had left, but it was clear that the damage had been done. I had taken back everything they had tried to take from me, and in doing so, I had finally reclaimed my power. I had faced the hardest truth of all. My children weren't who I thought they were, but that didn't mean I couldn't take back control. It didn't mean I couldn't rewrite my own story. The house was mine. The legacy was mine. And in the end, it was their regret that would haunt them forever. Do you think I went too far with my revenge? Was I right to take control, or did I lose myself in the process? I want to hear your thoughts. Comment below and let me know what you think. And if you haven't subscribed yet, hit the bell to get more shocking stories like this one.